Detectives tried to be tactful as they made house calls to follow up the sightings of cars in the prostitute areas.
Some of the people that we went to see, the male occupants of that house, namely the husband, associated with prostitutes. So we had to be very, very sensitive to that issue, had to be very diplomatic. We would have always preferred to talk to the gentleman of the house away from his wife for obvious reasons. We would say, excuse me, I'm a bit thirsty, do you think you could get me some water? And 9 times out of 10 we'd get a cup of tea, which obviously would take some preparation out of that room in the kitchen. And then we could talk quickly to the husband about his association with prostitutes. But if it was quite apparent that the man was not involved with prostitutes, we used to use different tactics. For example, we used to say to the wife, now's your chance to get rid of your husband if you want. And that was like an icebreaker. The reactions in some houses were different. I'd been thrown out of a house for that in a comic way. In some houses, we know for a fact that it was the husband who was fingered by the wife who wanted to get rid of the husband, not because he was a murderer, but because they were going through a difficult marriage.
Police followed up thousands of sightings, among them a red Ford Corsair, registration number PHE355G. Its owner, Mr. Peter Sutcliffe, of 6 Garden Lane, Heaton, Bradford. Sutcliffe was interviewed for the 3rd time in August 1978. His car had been seen 7 times in the red light areas of Leeds and Bradford. He told the police he was on his way to work, and his wife said they rarely went out at night. That information was duly recorded and filed in the index. The following spring, a building society clerk was walking home from her grandmother's late at night across Savile Park in Halifax. She was the 10th victim. Her name was Josephine Whittaker. She was 19. She'd been bitten by a man with a gap in his teeth. The internal police report made their feelings clear. The dead girl was not a prostitute, nor was her moral character questionable.
There is no difference in the eyes of a senior investigating officer whether she's a prostitute or a completely innocent victim like Josephine. The job is exactly the same, but the feelings are deeper.
The worrying thing now is that he's moved out of the red light areas where he's operated in the past, which makes it now that any woman is at risk.
I was working at Millgarth Street Police Station then, and I spoke to my mother on the phone who lived at Halifax, and she said, hey, a body's been found on the moor in Halifax, a building society girl. So that hit me more because I'd worked at Halifax Building Society prior to joining the police, and when I realised where she had been found, it was considered the best area in Halifax, and the thought that someone walking alone on that moor could be murdered, I just wouldn't have believed it, so it really brought it home to me, just that this man just struck anywhere on anybody.
The murder of Josephine Whittaker meant once again all police leave was cancelled, and morale was high, as Detective Superintendent Dick Holland was called back from holiday to take charge.
And there were these approximately 150 officers all assembled waiting for Dick Holland to come and brief us on this new inquiry. Dick Holland came through the door, and I could not believe the rapturous applause and adulation that man got, myself included, as he entered that chamber. It was remarkable. The only thing I can liken it to was like the Roman cavalry returning from defeating the barbarians and the Roman soldiers banging the shields with the swords. It might sound a corny analogy, but that's how I saw it, like a great leader returning to lead his troops.
Any murder inquiry is not pleasant. 10 is 10 times worse. But you just have to keep your nose to the grindstone. You've got to keep the troops at it and try and show the same enthusiasm when you're dealing with number 10 as you had when you first came into number 1.
The killer of Josephine Whittaker left behind some excellent clues. Another set of size 7 boot prints, this time clearly showing the right boot more worn than the left. And forensic scientists identified globules of engineering oil in the blood from some of her 25 stab wounds. A man with size 7 boots and a gap in his teeth. A man with oil on his hands and one boot more worn than the other. An engineer, a factory worker, a lorry driver. No woman in the north of England now went out alone at night if she could avoid it.
When we went across to the car park,
Yes.
we always went 2, 3 of you together. We knew we could be the next victim as easily as anyone else. We knew that we mustn't go anywhere on our own.
That's right. Yeah, I think one of the things we did discuss as well is that it would have been really a feather in his cap if he had managed to get one of us from the incident room.
True, yes.
And that's something we discuss quite often. The fact that we were working in Millgarth, the car park was directly opposite. From an observation point of view, he could have seen straight in, he could have followed any of us to our cars. And we often said, what a feather in his cap if he just happened to get one of us on our own.
And then a final envelope arrived from the letter writer in Sunderland. At Millgarth Police Station in Leeds, Sergeant Megan Winterburn was working in the incident room.
Mr. Oldfield came in and just shouted, "Meg, can you come over here, please?" Now, I went across to the door and said, "I want you in my office now, please." Now, for Mr. Oldfield to say please, I knew there was something a little bit amiss, because he was usually quite a gruff man. And he either didn't use your name at all, or he would just say, "You, now, my office." And he'd actually said please, so I knew something significant had happened. I remember following him into his office, and he had a tape recorder on the desk, and he just said, "I want you to listen to this."
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but Lord, you are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started.
I sat with a manual typewriter in a little room and typed the transcription. It was the most peculiar feeling in that room. It was like you were sick to the pit of your stomach. There was this tape that allegedly has come from the Ripper, and just the thought that it might actually be this man's voice, instead of being elated, it made my stomach churn.
I reckon your boys are letting you down, George. They can't be much good, can they?
I had to play it over and over again to be able to write the shorthand and then to transcribe it. But yes, first reaction was, this is a man who knows what's happened. It's the Ripper.
They went public with the tape and letters from Sunderland on the 26th of June 1979. Reporters from all over Britain were there to listen.
At the rate I'm going, I should be in the book of records. I think it's 11 up now, isn't it? Well, I'll keep on going. quite a while yet.
Public response was enormous. 50,000 calls.
I can't see myself being nicked just yet.
We've got over 200 detectives out now following up leads. Obviously, it's far too early to say what's coming from any of them.
I thought he was taunting us. I thought it was a genuine tape from the Ripper taunting us for not having caught him. The actions, in fact, of a psychopath in that he enjoys the chase and enjoys taunting the investigators.
A killer taunting the police, or a hoaxer wasting their time. Desperate for a positive lead and in failing health, George Oldfield got it wrong. For him and Dick Holland, this was the voice of the killer.
Obviously, I'll live with that for the rest of my life. I'll live with being a party to the wrong decision. But if we hadn't gone down and it had been correct, that would have been even worse to live with.
I warned you in March that I'd strike again.
Well, before, we know we've been looking for a man, and there are literally millions, and we didn't know where he came from. But now that we can localise the area, the field is not appreciably, as I'm sure you must agree.
I always remember the image, seeing him on television, having received the tapes from the man who claimed to be the perpetrator, goading him, and of George hunched over the tape recorder listening to it with Dick Holland at his side. And I thought then, this is getting personal.
Well, it's been nice chatting to you, George. Yours, Jack the Ripper.
There could be only one victor in this personal battle. Not the detective from Yorkshire, not the voice from Sunderland, but an invisible man, a man with a Bradford accent. Peter Sutcliffe won 18 more months of freedom, and 3 more women died.
And you can see the concluding part on Tuesday at 10 o'clock.